There is a moment that almost every person alive has felt, even if they never had the words for it. It is that quiet, crushing sensation of waking up and realizing that your life looks nothing like what you once imagined it would. Not because of laziness, not because you lacked intelligence or talent, but because somewhere along the way, you started living for something that was never truly yours. You followed the path that was laid out before you could even ask whether you wanted it. You chased the approval of people who will never fully understand you, and you called that responsibility. You shrunk yourself to fit into spaces that were never built for someone like you, and you called that maturity. And now, years later, you stand in the middle of a life that functions perfectly on the outside and feels completely hollow on the inside, wondering if this is simply what adulthood feels like, or if you made some terrible, irreversible mistake somewhere along the road. What if you were never lost? What if everything that happened to you, every failure, every rejection, every moment of doubt that made you question your own worth, was not a sign that you were broken, but the exact pressure required to forge something the world has never seen before? This is not comfort. This is not motivational language designed to make you feel better for 10 minutes before the emptiness returns. This is a philosophical confrontation with the deepest question a human being can face, which is whether your suffering has meaning or whether you have simply been enduring pain for nothing. Nietzsche had an answer to this question, and it was not gentle, but it was real in a way that almost nothing else is. Friedrich Nietzsche spent most of his life misunderstood, dismissed, and physically devastated by illness. He wrote in isolation, published work that almost no one read during his lifetime, and collapsed into madness before he ever saw the world begin to grapple with his ideas. And yet, even in the middle of that brutal existence, he arrived at a concept so radical, so completely opposed to everything modern culture teaches about success and happiness, that it continues to disturb people more than a century after his death. He called it amor fati, the love of fate. Not the acceptance of fate, not the tolerance of fate, the love of it, which means something far more demanding and far more liberating than most people are prepared to receive. Most of us were taught, in ways both explicit and invisible, that a good life is one in which suffering is minimized. We were taught that pain is something to be avoided, treated, medicated, or at minimum survived as quickly as possible before returning to normalcy. We measure our progress by how comfortable we have become, how many problems we have solved, how many obstacles we have removed from our path. This is the architecture of the modern mind, and Nietzsche saw it clearly for what it was, which is a slow, quiet surrender of everything that makes a human being great. He saw that by building an entire civilization around the avoidance of suffering, we had inadvertently built a civilization that was terrified of depth, terrified of transformation, and utterly incapable of producing the kind of human being who could look at their own life and say with complete honesty that they would choose it again, every single piece of it, including the worst parts. Amor fati does not ask you to pretend that pain is pleasant. It does not ask you to smile through devastation or perform gratitude while you are quietly drowning. What it asks is something far more radical. It asks you to recognize that the events of your life, including the ones that broke you, are not interruptions to your destiny. They are the material from which your destiny is constructed. There is no version of you that becomes who you are capable of becoming without passing through exactly what you have already passed through. The grief, the betrayal, the years of feeling invisible, the relationships that ended in silence, the careers that collapsed before they began, the long stretches of time when you looked in the mirror and could not recognize anything worth keeping. All of it was not a detour. All of it was the path. Here is something worth pausing on for a moment, because it sits at the very center of what Nietzsche was trying to say. He did not believe in a destiny that was handed to you from above, some cosmic plan, written before your birth that you simply needed to discover and follow. That idea belongs to a different tradition entirely, one built on comfort and the abdication of personal responsibility. What Nietzsche believed in was a destiny that you create through the quality of your response to everything life throws at you. Your fate is not what happens to you. Your fate is what you make of what happens to you, and that distinction, small as it might sound, contains the difference between a life that is endured and a life that is fully inhabited. Before we go further, there is something important to say, and it comes directly from the spirit of what this channel is trying to do. If you are someone who has spent years feeling like your pain was pointless, like your struggles made you weak rather than capable, like everyone around you seemed to move through life with an ease that you simply could not access no matter how hard you tried, then this space was built for you. Drop the words "I am still becoming" in the comments right now. Not as a performance, not as a hollow gesture, but because when one person speaks that truth out loud, it gives permission to every other person watching this who has been carrying the same silence alone. Your comment is not just a comment, it is a signal to someone else in this exact moment that they are not as isolated as they believe themselves to be, and that small act of courage costs nothing and means everything to the person who needs to see it. Now here is where Nietzsche becomes truly unsettling, even for those who believe they already understand what he was saying. Most people who encounter amor fati treat it as a philosophy of acceptance, a kind of sophisticated resignation dressed in stronger language. They hear it and they think, yes, I should be more at peace with the difficult things in my life, and then they move on, unchanged, because they have domesticated the idea before it had a chance to transform them. But Nietzsche was not describing a philosophy of peace. He was describing a philosophy of fire when he said, love your fate. He was not suggesting a passive emotional state. He was issuing a command to actively will your life into meaning, to take the raw, often brutal material of your personal history and refuse to let it be merely something that happened to you. The difference between surviving your past and being shaped by it deliberately is the difference between a rock worn smooth by the river and a sculptor who picks up the chisel. Nietzsche connected amor fati directly to his concept of the will to power, which is perhaps the most misunderstood idea in all of Western philosophy. It has nothing to do with domination over others. It has everything to do with the drive to overcome yourself, to take whatever you currently are and push through the resistance towards something greater, not for external recognition, but because the act of becoming is its own reason. And this is where destiny enters in a completely different form than most people expect. Your destiny, in Nietzsche's framework, is not a fixed point waiting for you at the end of a road. It is a direction that you discover by moving, by making choices, by failing and continuing, by loving the entirety of your experience, with enough intensity that even the worst chapters become fuel rather than weight. Think about the moments in your life that changed you most permanently, not the pleasant ones, though those matter too. The ones that altered the shape of your thinking, that dismantled something you believed was permanent and forced you to build a new understanding from the debris. Every single one of those moments had something in common. They required you. They required your specific sensitivity, your particular way of processing pain, your individual threshold for endurance. Someone else faced with the same circumstances would have emerged with a completely different result. The fact that you emerged at all, and that you are here right now watching something about the philosophical nature of destiny rather than simply consuming distraction, says something about the quality of the material you are made of, whether you believe that about yourself or not. This is the confrontation that Nietzsche was preparing his readers for. Not the confrontation with the world, but the confrontation with themselves. The moment you stop asking why this happened to me and start asking what this is making me into, you cross a threshold that most people spend their entire lives standing just outside of. On one side of that threshold is a person who is defined by their circumstances. On the other side is a person who defines what their circumstances mean. Both people experience the same external events, but only one of them is living with any real authorship over their own existence, and only one of them will look back at the end and feel with complete honesty that their life was worth the cost of living it. Nietzsche wrote, in a passage that deserves to be read more than once, that his formula for greatness in a human being is amor fati, not to wish things to be different, not forward, not backward, not in all eternity, not merely to tolerate what is necessary, but to love it. These words were not written from a comfortable life. They were written from inside one of the most painful human experiences of his era, which means they carry a weight that comfortable philosophy simply cannot replicate. He was not describing what it looks like to love your fate when things are going well. He was describing what it looks like to love your fate precisely when everything inside you wants to reject it, and to recognize that rejection as the last wall standing between who you are and who you are capable of becoming. If this reached something in you that you have not been able to name in a long time, then please take 1 second and give this video a like. Not for the algorithm alone, though that genuinely matters for this content to find the people who need it most. Do it because every like is a quiet signal that this kind of depth has a place in the world, that not everyone wants to be entertained out of their pain, that some people are willing to sit with difficult ideas long enough to let them change something real. That matters more than you might think. And if you are someone who has felt for a long time that you were living someone else's life, that the version of you walking through each day is somehow a reduced edition of who you actually are, then this channel was made specifically for you. Subscribe not because you are supposed to, but because every video here is built around the same commitment, which is to take philosophy seriously as a tool for transformation and to bring it directly into contact with the real weight of real lives. Nietzsche believed that ideas were not meant to be stored in books and admired from a distance. He believed they were meant to be lived, fought with, resisted, and eventually metabolized into something that changes how you stand in the world. That is what this channel is here for. Every week, another confrontation. Every video, another invitation to become someone you have not yet had permission to be. You deserve that permission, and it starts now.